Best talent, best resume, best team. Welcome to the Voice of College Football and our breakdown of the Big Ten and our power rankings heading into Week 8. Let's break it down. So my top 25 that actually makes sense is based completely on results on the field, performance on the field. Based on your feedback, I have approached these conference rankings starting last week more from the standpoint of these are the teams that I believe to be the best in that particular conference based on my opinion, based on whatever my observation is, the results, the performance to date, but also where I think the trajectory is, where the talent lies, and where this team projects forward. So we are taking that approach to the Big Ten and our rankings 14 all the way up to number 1, and the worst team in the Big Ten right now is Illinois. They're coming off a bye week. In their last performance, they lost to Wisconsin 24-0. Consider that Wisconsin is still struggling on offense, and they outgained Illinois almost 500-100. It was a 5-1 ratio and held Illinois to under 100 yards of total offense with 93. Illinois at Penn State this week, 1-3 in the Big Ten. At number 13, we've got Rutgers. What a great start to the season. I still think Greg Schiano is doing good things in Piscataway. They got off to the 3-0 start. That 10-point win over Syracuse looks a lot better right now than it did then, but everything since then has not looked good for a team that defeated Temple on the opening weekend, 61-14. Again, 3-0 start, but since then, of course, we knew it was going to be difficult against the likes of Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, but against Northwestern. And the Michigan performance was obviously promising, taking the Wolverines down to the final possession, outplaying them at the Big House in the second half. But since then, just crushed by Ohio State, outplayed by Michigan State far more than what the scoreboard would indicate. And then they take on a Northwestern team that was giving up 657 yards of total offense against Nebraska. They gained only 1.9 yards per carry. Rutgers against Northwestern, they just couldn't get anything done. This is a Rutgers team that is just faltering right now. We will see if they can play better against the likes of Indiana and Maryland on their level, more so in the coming weeks. Rutgers at number 13. At number 12, the aforementioned Wildcats of Northwestern. Through much of this season, they have played like the worst team. I thought the worst team initially was Illinois. Then kind of Northwestern stole that from them by giving up 30 points in the first half to Duke, being completely annihilated by 7 touchdowns to Nebraska. Nebraska beats everyone by 1 touchdown or they lose by 1 touchdown. But against Northwestern, 49 points. Just abysmal performances across the board, only defeated an FCS and a low-level group of 5 team. But last weekend, now I've got to give them the nod up to number 12 because it was a secure performance against Rutgers, winning that one 21-7. I just mentioned the rush defense for Northwestern against Rutgers. It was stellar. Ryan Helinski had a nice game, 267 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. Even though Northwestern could only gain 2.8 yards per carry, they were committed to the run, 48 carries against Rutgers. Now they go to Michigan for the big noon game on Saturday. Northwestern at 3-3 overall, 1-2 in the Big Ten, go to Michigan. At number 11, we've got Maryland. The Terps got off to that hot start, 4-0. I thought that there was some substance there because of the win against West Virginia, but we see that the Mountaineers aren't necessarily that good at 2-4. Now Maryland got hit in the mouth, of course, against Iowa and Ohio State to the tune of 117-31 in back-to-back blowout losses. They come off the bye. They're a dangerous team to be going up to Minnesota to take on the Gophers. Maryland at number 11 at 4-2, 1-2 in the Big Ten. At number 10, Indiana, the most disappointing team in the conference, along with Wisconsin. You could make the argument there. Michael Penix appears not to be ready for this game. Jack Tuttle made the start against Michigan State, a game in which Indiana, consider Michigan State, top 10 team, 6-0 at that point, go to Bloomington and credit Indiana for staying in the game despite throwing an early pick 6. It was a 20-15 game, a game that was 17-15 late. So Indiana hung in there despite the sloppy performance. But no downfield passing game with Jack Tuttle in the game. 52 attempts, 188 yards is paltry pedestrian offense. Indiana has to take on Ohio State this weekend. At number 9, the curious season of Nebraska continues. Close, gut-wrenching losses to, of course, Oklahoma, Michigan State, and Michigan. Then they take on Minnesota, a team that you would think, in a sense, that they could handle. They were a road favorite. They lost that one 30-23. So Nebraska seems to lose to anyone that they played. They could play the Kansas City Chiefs. They could play the Yukon Huskies. They're going to lose by one score. So Nebraska's got the week off. Then they go to Purdue. They take on Purdue at 3-5. At number 8, we've got Wisconsin. Coming off a very pedestrian, I'll use that word again, win against Army as a 2-touchdown favorite. They won it 20-14 over Army. They get the non-conference win following a shutout of Illinois, so they're starting to get back on track, but that might be due to the opponent they're facing. Wisconsin goes to Purdue this weekend. Interesting game in the Big Ten Western Division because despite all the Badgers' struggles, everyone dismissing Wisconsin football, keep this in mind, they can still win the Big Ten Western Division. They have 2 losses. All their competition has 1 loss, and they still have yet to play everyone. Their 2 losses in the Big Ten are to Michigan and Penn State. They've got to play everybody ahead of them. If they win out, which seems unlikely because they're just not playing good offensive football, but with that defense, number 1 rushing defense in the country, they've got a possibility. Wisconsin at 8. Here's the team that controls the division right now. It's Minnesota, not Purdue because they beat Iowa. It's Minnesota because Minnesota beat Purdue. Now, of course, they have yet to play Wisconsin and Iowa in particular, but Minnesota's coming off a nice win at home against Nebraska. So they've got the key win against Purdue. So at 2-1 in the Big Ten, they control their destiny. They've got a difficult game potentially against Maryland. They're down to their 3rd-string running back. Of course, Mo Ibrahim, one of the best in the land, lost against Ohio State in week 1, scored 15 touchdowns in 7 games last year. Huge loss. Then they bring in Terry Potts, and Potts had a great 3-game run, averaged about 150 yards per game, and then suffered a serious injury against Purdue that's still undisclosed, but he's going to be out for the rest of the season. But now you got Bryce Williams, who stepped into the lineup after carrying the ball only 9 times in 3 years. 127 yards against Nebraska on 17 carries. So they found their 3rd-string tailback, and he can do the job. Tanner Morgan may have rediscovered 2019 in this last game, completing just 52% of his passes this year. He hit on 20 of 24 against Nebraska. Again, maybe shades of 2019. Minnesota takes on Maryland this week at number 7. Our number 6 team in the Big Ten, Purdue. 4-2, 2-1 in the Big Ten. Of course, the huge win against Iowa, one of the stranger stats in all of college football, that Purdue has more unranked wins versus number 2 teams in the nation than any team by far. They've got 9 in their program's history. It's an unranked team taking on the number 2 team in the country. The next best is 4. Purdue themselves are ranked for the first time since 2007. That was the longest streak in college football. Aiden O'Connell has taken over at quarterback. They finally have that settled, 30 of 40 against Iowa. And, of course, David Bell's a monster. 11 catches against the Hawkeyes secondary, one of the best in the land. 240 yards in that game. Purdue at number 6. They face Wisconsin at home, guarding against the letdown. All right, at number 5, we've got Sparty. 7-0, 4-0 in the Big Ten. Not necessarily the best effort this last time out. Their weakest offensive performance of the season, squeaking by Indiana 20-15. They were super sharp against Rutgers, then had the letdown against Indiana. But good teams that win conference championships, will have a couple stumbles against mediocre competition. But what do they do with it? They get by. They survive. That's what Michigan State did, certainly in this game, despite only 84 yards on the ground from Kenneth Walker. Michigan State's got a bye. Then the huge matchup at the end of October against Michigan. Michigan, our number 4 team, also 6-0, 3-0 in the Big Ten. Cade McNamara has been steady, but do they need J.J. McCarthy to be that guy that can leap them past Penn State and, of course, Ohio State? Do they need that superior quarterback play? That's been the debate among Michigan fans. Michigan, again, takes on Northwestern at noon this weekend. At number 3, Iowa, the Hawkeyes, 6-1, 3-1 in the Big Ten. And it's easy to now downgrade Iowa and say, oh, it's just Iowa, and we knew this was going to happen. This is still a really good football team. Yes, some things caught up with them. They weren't able to get the turnovers on defense at the rate that they had, and the offense proved to be pretty marginal at best. So the offensive woes continue against Purdue. They only score one touchdown. They lose 24-7, but still a strong team. They're going to be viable down the stretch of the Big Ten Western Division. This run of games in the Big Ten Western Division is going to be mighty interesting. Everybody's in play, just about 5 of the 7 teams. All right, at number 2, we got Penn State coming off, of course, the bye. They've got Illinois this Saturday. They're 5-1. And if we're just talking about who's played the best in the Big Ten, it's Penn State. Who's played the best football, considering that they went to Iowa, lost Sean Clifford up 17-3, and then lost the game 23-20 and had control of that game through the first half. Because otherwise, they've got wins against Auburn. They beat Wisconsin. They've got good wins across the board. Taquan Roberson was obviously not prepared for the moment against Iowa. He stepped in, and the offense just shut down. He's probably going to start against Indiana. You would think with the bye week and 2 weeks of prep that he would be ready, and James Franklin would have him ready for Illinois. It's Penn State, Illinois this weekend. We'll see when Sean Clifford's able to come back, because the Buckeyes await in Columbus the next weekend. Penn State at number 2 takes on Illinois. And at number 1, Ohio State. Have they played the best? Have they faced the best opponents? No. Penn State's played the best overall, and Ohio State in no way has taken on the best opponents. Just about everybody on the top half of this list has faced somebody difficult in the Big Ten. But Ohio State, if you take into consideration the talent and the improving defense, they held Maryland to 17 points. They held Rutgers to basically nothing that mattered, 6 points in the first half, and the offense is just rolling. By far the best offense in the Big Ten. It's not even close. So they've got a 9.5 on offense, when the second best offense in the Big Ten is probably Michigan State or Penn State or Michigan at a 6.5. And then the Ohio State defense might be a 6, but they can catch up in this one. There's no question about that. They've got the out-of-conference loss, but they are rolling on offense right now. But now it gets difficult. So we saw what Indiana did against Michigan State. They made it a game. They could against Ohio State in Bloomington, possibly. But let's say even if the Buckeyes roll in this one to the tune of 50 to whatever, now add Purdue to this closing stretch, and the last 5 games of the season for the Buckeyes are going to be something else, with Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, and now put Purdue into the mix for the Buckeyes. So they will have to prove it here, of course, coming up in October and November. Our Big Ten power rankings: Ohio State's number 1, Penn State 2, Iowa 3, Michigan 4, Michigan State 5. At number 6, we got Purdue, followed by Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Indiana at 10, Maryland, Northwestern, Rutgers, and Illinois. Leave us your comments and suggestions down below, right here at the Voice of College Football.